Welcome to Beyond the Dragon, where we explore indie tabletop role-playing games and their design, to inspire you to play them or take what you like for your own creations. Hi there, my name's Oscar C. Tango.
And my name is Sun.
We're both tabletop game designers and professional game masters who love TTRPGs, and today we will be discussing classes and classless games in game design. Welcome everyone to another Unnamed Design Segment. Today, as mentioned, we will be discussing class design and classes in games and how those all work out.
Yeah.
I have a lot of opinions on this one, so in the sake of not immediately taking off at a sprint, Sun.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just state straight away. I think if I had to choose between one or the other, when I normally wouldn't, I'm okay with either of them in different ways they're represented and the like. But if I had to choose one, I'd probably go with classes. I like the design space. So from like a designer's point of view, I like the design space it provides and all that stuff. And I like the strong theming that can come with them that, can say a lot about the game and the world and the certain playstyles. Classless, I love the pure freedom that it gets. Depending on how the classlessness is, presented, that could be feat lists, skills that you put points into, that might give you access to different feat lists and the like. But yeah, they each have their benefits. Pure freedom and the space to design out your character from classless, and then the core themes and character foundations and archetypes that classes provide. But they do have their cons too. Classless might not. There might be some choice paralysis, trap choices, prerequisite chains that might feel like it's just like point taxes or the like, and there might not be some mechanical support for concepts, or not enough mechanical support for it. But then also classes, they can be too restrictive, or the concept that you want for this particular game, there is not a class that provides a close enough representation of your idea. So you need to just accept one thing, or what a lot of people do with the in a D&D sense, the multi-classing thing and the like. But I don't want to go too far on. That's just a nice summary of, I guess, straight up of my opinion.
Okay, so just to confirm, because I think I may have misheard you, you are pro-class.
Yes. If I had to choose, pro class.
You are a class supporter, I see.
Yes.
Yup. Alright, well, I don't like classes in my games. Burn them to the fucking ground. They should not exist. I think that unless they are handled in a very specific way, classes are a waste of everyone's time.
Go on.
Oh, you would like me to elaborate? Alright, so, no.
Well, unless you want to end the podcast here.
Yeah, no, you know what? That's the episode. Thanks for watching, folks. No, okay, so classes are an inherently limiting feature. Unless they are handled in a very specific way, which is a low commitment package of things you get. For instance, a starting character archetype that does not define what you will continue to have and develop as you go on, I would not necessarily consider that a class. I would consider that a character creation option, but one could argue that they're kind of the same thing. You choose a class in class-having games.
I'll just throw out there that I choose that. I classify it as a class.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, a lot of the cons you're talking about take what I love about role playing games out of the game. As I have mentioned to you on multiple occasions,
Yeah.
I'm playing a role playing game, so how about you let me go and play a fucking role?
And well, in my opinion, classes provide that opportunity to play those
Unless
types of roles.
unless the role you're wanting to play has not been properly supported by the dev.
No, no.
And that's
And
that's one of the
uh,
difficulties. It's harder to use classes to come up with a unique play style. I know that some. No, you know what? I'm gonna go on that. If you're familiar with 5e, fifth edition classes are entirely they tell you what you are. They tell you how to play them. You do not make choices of any meaningful value unless you are a spellcaster. You choose your class, you choose your subclass, and from there on, it is a list of things you get at fixed intervals. It is defined for you. You do not make a choice. And I know there are games out there like Pathfinder 2e, which I'm sure all the Pathfinder 2e fans are shouting right now, where, oh yeah, but then you get to pick things like feats. Oh, you get to pick these special abilities from a list on your class, and that way you can build your character more. And yeah, that does still exist. But you're still kind of stuck just playing into that archetype. And even games like 3.5 or Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2e, when you get to choose options from what your class gives you, you still cannot develop nearly as unique a playstyle as you may be able to with a classless game.
yeah, no, totally fair enough. And like on your points of like, yeah, going down into specific focuses and all that. In some way, I'm totally understand that. And one of the points I was going to bring up, I've basically written out examples of some class types things, and one of the thing was D&D 5th edition, and I put a nice big X next to it because in one way, yes, you choose the fighter at level 1, and then you choose your subclass at level 3, and they're all the meaningful choices you make outside of the optional feat thing every so often.
Yeah, the either what
And
stats to level or your optional feat, if your GM
yeah,
allows it.
and that is it for 20 levels. And yeah, no, in a more concise manner, I'd be okay with that. But for 20 levels, and yeah, it's not my favorite way that classes has been presented. And you've mentioned Pathfinder Second Edition. It takes that D&D idea. Oh, you're playing for 20 levels. You pick a class, and that's the core style of how you're going to play that character. And then instead of things coming to you at different levels, yeah, you choose feats to emphasize and differentiate your play styles and flavor of that core uh, playstyle concept. That is definitely, in my opinion, a nice balance. It takes a little bit from the classlessness and puts it into the nice constrained design space of classes. And then your other comment of picking a class at the start and then that's it. There's nothing else. You then can do whatever. Yeah, like is not the best example, but it's the one that I have right here in front of me. Another way that I prefer classes to be done is, yeah, I pick everything and that's it. There's no surprises. There's no waiting. And the one that I just pulled out of my ass was light, where yeah, you just pick a class at the start and uh, all your abilities are all set, and I don't have to wait anymore. And the one of the other things that they differentiate is like the beats, which is basically just, if you think Powered by the Apocalypse, are ways to advance your character. But you're not getting like extra special stuff. It's just like minor boosts to your core stats. But that helps emphasize how you would play that style of character. And yeah, they're the three that I wanted to just throw out there immediately. But yeah, I do like the constraints. The constraints, you know, provides that cool design space, and yeah, I'll use constraints in a positive light.
So here's the thing. I would argue that you don't need a class to have those constraints, because a class is nothing more than a tool package when a classless design space is a tool kit.
Yes. I totally understand that, but also I like the main, I'm going to say, selling feature of the classes for me, as a designer, is I can specifically design these things that work together in a very cohesive manner. And, if I get them as I'm leveling up, those things later down the line will work together with the things that I have at the start. Or the things at the start will work better with the things that I get later. And they all tie together nicely. And you could do that in a classless thing where, they give, just a guide. It's like, hey, take this thing. And, you could take that thing later. Or as you're reading through the lists of crap, you can be like, ooh, this would work well with that. But I do like the idea of just designing that all together and being like, look at this cool thing you can do if you pick this class, instead of going through a menu and picking from them. And not, those things would have to be designed with the idea that anyone could pick them, unless you specifically go with the idea of a prerequisite chain, which in a way is basically a package, i.e. an archetype class. But no, totally understandable. But there is some constraints which allow that design space to really sing.
I fundamentally, just from a design standpoint, you're right. Designing classes is most of the time a lot easier to balance, because you look at what they are able to do and you line them up point by point.
Oh, and it's fun, for me at least. It's just fun.
From a
More fun to do
player
it that way.
perspective, I find it boring as shit. It is the most boring design choice you can make.
Fair enough.
Because I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how we engage with this particular media, and how that works and does things, and, well, simply put, I've come to a bit of a conclusion that player choice is fundamentally of a rather critical aspect of tabletop role-playing games. You see, I've been thinking about the railroads recently, and frankly, from a design perspective, you can railroad your players as hard as any GM. And depending on the way that your classes work, like, you can achieve levels of railroad, because, you're right, a class does just give you some things at certain intervals, and that is easier to balance. On the other hand, I have a class-based game that looks at that and says, no, because, to skip a little bit ahead by a week, you see, one of the core fundamental concepts of Lancer's class design is that if everything is broken, everything is balanced. And let me tell you, it works surprisingly okay.
Well, I'll just make mention, I don't care about the balance bit. Like, yeah, classes allow for that design space, but also, that's not a pro that I'll just have on my list. But it definitely is a pro if you care about those things. But yes.
Yeah.
Go on.
A player being able to define their own play style. Well, you're right. There is an aspect of, I wouldn't ever say throw away archetypes, throw away character builds, pre-built tip things for how to make a character. Because we've both played Open Legends. We've both seen one of the extremes with character freedom as a concept.
Yeah, and even that game had in the book, and all that, the pre-gens and all that stuff.
Yeah, and the pre-gens worked. They were as functional as any class that you might make on your own.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say do away with those, because you're right. When it comes to classless design, to some aspect, character paralysis can be a thing. And there are design challenges in designing a classless character fun. But it allows for significantly more player input on what's happening with the game and how they interact with it, which I think is a fundamentally important aspect of this medium of, tabletop role-playing games. And, arguably, like, any game with a degree of player freedom, video games, players taking non-class-based video games and combining weird skills to make crazy, unique builds is a common thing that occurs in video games and in TTRPGs, one of the things they share. And that's kind of part of the fun of playing them, is being able to sit down and make a build and do something with that. And it's actually one of the things that most disappointed me when I first sat down to play TTRPGs. Was I sat down to play 5th edition, and I wasn't making a build, I was playing a class, and I became very disillusioned with that almost immediately, which is why Open Legends was like, oh, I can do whatever I want, let's go. Not to say that these constraints aren't important, but there are ways to achieve those with classless designs that don't necessarily. Again, I would never say do away with pre-made character builds or archetypes to show your players, so that the less experienced can say, well, I'm going to pick this and it's going to do this, and I know it works at doing that. Because 100% super important to do. But I also heavily believe in the freedom of picking and choosing things on your own. So we've kind of talked about the merits of classless versus classes, and it's very clear that we both have very different opinions on, like, the fundamental necessity of... Like we can agree on the pros and cons. Classless, you have more class paralysis, it can be harder to get into, and you're right, there are things where it's like, I want to do this, so I chose this. Oh no, that was a trap decision, which I would argue that's a failure of game design, and I have the authors of 3.5 D&D to back me up on that, since I've seen a lot of them come out as saying, yeah, we built it with trap choices, and looking back, that was a shitty decision.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. It's just one of those very easy and simple things to accidentally do.
And the fact that
it keeps being brought up, it means we're not over that speed bump yet.
No, but you know what, to be fair, I also, as I said, I have the authors of 3.5 to back me up on that, but also 3.5 is a class-based game, so clearly that is a speed bump that is capable of happening anywhere.
Oh, yeah, well, 3.5, they decide we'll have classes and millions of feats as well, so yeah.
I mean, true, but also the Ranger and Monk classes exist in 5e, so we're really not over that speed bump.
I want to... we're going to transition to something, because
I
was going to...
Sorry. Oh, no. If you have something, I was going to suggest going into actual, like, design of these and... like discussing that more, but please bring up your thing.
Okay, well, I guess this might transition over into that. Why don't I wanted to bring up another example of classes that eschews the typical, at least typical to D&D players, 5e players, that I know you do like. I don't know if it's your favorite, but I feel like I remembered you saying something. Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Shadow of the Demon Lord is currently my favorite fantasy game.
Yeah, so Shadow of the Demon Lord, for anyone that doesn't know, we did a podcast on it, so you can go watch that episode if you really want.
Episode 3.
Basically, from level 1 to level 10, you start level 0, but at level 1, you pick your first class. It's a path. That's your novice path. And you'll level that up as you play, and then at level 3, you pick your second class, your expert path, and then at level 7, you can pick your third and final class, your master path, or you can choose to pick a second expert class. But I don't want to get into the details there.
Yeah.
And basically, in your novice paths are very simple. You got your fighter, you got your priest, you got your magician, and you got your rogue. Then experts they go more in detail. You have your warrior, and then you have your fighter. You'll have a paladin. You'll have a cleric. You have a sorcerer, a warlock, etc., etc., etc. But you don't need to be a warrior then go fighter. You can be like, I'm going to be a magician as a novice pass, and then I'll go fighter as my expert, and then I'll finish off as my master as an alchemist or something for some reason. And the game kind of expects you to basically play out the campaign, and based on the campaign, you'll make story decisions to be like, oh, okay, because of that, I decided to go this path. But also, it allows the design monkeys to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to choose novice and then this expert and that master. So it gives you 3 major class building choices throughout your 10 levels, which allows you to build out your major character altogether. And because of the combinations of how many paths there are, it is in the, I think, million potentially.
I haven't ever done the permutations, but it's 430 or 416 64.
In the base, in the core book, yeah.
Yeah, we aren't. Fuck, man. If you wanna talk about every fucking path released across every single expansion, you quickly run across, I think, nearly 300 paths.
Yeah. And I've brought this up in the podcast, I think, and I'll bring it up again. But it's it's similar to the Paragon or Epic classes of D&D yesterday. In particular, D&D 4th edition, which had 30 levels, and first 10 were your heroic class, and then I think it was then Epic for the next 10 levels, and then Paragon for the next 10 levels after that.
You are asking the wrong man.
Oh, yeah. I'm just trying to think. I think it's HEP because that's how the adventure models are labeled. But yeah. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that you could expand upon that.
Oh yeah, no, actually,
the 3 classes.
That is a perfect transition, because I was going to start with talking about class design and what I liked and what I didn't and where I felt the pitfalls were. So since you started with Shadow, let's discuss my favorite fantasy game and what I think it does right about classes and what I think it does wrong about classes.
Yep, go ahead.
So, as Sun mentioned, Shadow the Demon Lord, you get 3 classes throughout your 10 levels of play, notably at levels 1, 3, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, this does keep a character making important character decisions every 3 to 4 levels or so, And I will say I like that, and there are a number of classes that allow you to, besides getting a fixed ability at a set point, will then go on to say, hey, you know what? Sometimes you get to make a meaningful choice, most notably the rogue, with rogue talents and some of the expert paths, and I'm sure I'll learn about the master paths that do it soon too. God, forgive me for ever trying to play Shadow on Foundry. So yeah, no, it does do that, and it does lean into meaningful character choice, and obviously spellcasters, you get to choose your spells. And at the beginning of each class, you get to choose a number of upgrades that you get to your stats. So this is a type of class design. Also, as Sun mentioned, you can pivot with no prior requirements. You don't need to have been a magician, and you don't need to have a certain amount of intellect or will to pivot into being a wizard. You can play a 7 intellect, 8 will wizard. You're probably not going to have a great time, but you can do it.
Yeah.
So The thing I think this does right is, as I said, it focuses on character input for making an interesting character. Because at each tier of play, you are making a new choice that will change how your character works and grows over time. With Novice having the most long-lasting repercussions, but also being the simplest choice of only 4 classes. It also does a good job of slowly increasing complexity as you only get new things that you have to worry about very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow also does not worry about limiting players on what they can do based on class. There's no concept of proficiency, there is simply stat requirements.
Mm.
This is what it does right. What Shadow does wrong can be seen in the fact that, other than spellcasters at Novice, the only meaningful class choice I mentioned was the Rogue. The Rogue gets something called Rogue Talents. There are a number of expert paths that get their own talents, fighters, and several rogue variants like the Thief and a couple other ones I can't remember off the top of my head. And then, like I said, I haven't looked super deep at the master paths yet, because there's a lot of them.
For what I remember, as far as in the core book, the master paths are pretty simple.
Okay.
I don't think any of them have a pool of talents to choose from.
Oh, thank God. But yeah, no. So, there's some things have a pool of optional talents that you get to choose from that further specialize and define your playstyle. More classes don't than do. So the thing is that at your level where you pick a new class, you do get to make a variety of important choices with varying lengths of time for the repercussions that they're going to have on your playstyle and what it affects. From how much health you're probably going to have to whether or not you can cast spells, how high level spell you can cast, what types of abilities you're getting. But a lot of the classes just tell you what you get. So you make... Yep. It's very possible to choosing a certain... If you choose... fuck it, we'll say Fighter, Berserker, and then Defender. You make 3 choices over the course of your character's career. You choose your class, and your class. And so it is significantly more freeform than something like Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons, because you wind up being able to make millions of weird combinations. I wouldn't say that there are directly any trap choices, although there are certain themes that pop up if you're looking for certain goals in your build, I will admit. But the thing is that the classes themselves rarely offer any kind of choice. So what it is you make 3 choices rather than making 10 choices.
Yeah.
And I think I took a long time to say that, sorry.
All good. I don't want to get into it too much, but and it might have been better for the Shadow of the Demon Lord episode, but there is another choice that happens generally. No, I think every single time you pick a class that I feel like is undersold or looked over or just I have it now, but I feel like it should be emphasized more. Is you also gain a profession.
That is true. You do gain a profession.
Yeah, which for non-Shadow the Demon Lord, it's basically just a vague collection of skills.
Do masters get professions?
Yes, I believe so. Master gets a profession as well.
Oh, cool. Oh, and also sometimes you get a language. Sometimes you get both. Sometimes you get a choice. Yeah.
And, that's basically the very simple mechanic narrative skill system. But I feel like that could be emphasized more because a lot of times it does state, if you have a profession in this, you don't have to roll, or you get more information, or if you've got so many professions that cater to this one task at hand, you definitely don't need to roll because you've just got so many boons on it. So it is a very small mechanic that I feel like has a lot more weight, or can have a lot more weight than a lot more people are giving it.
No,
Potentially.
you were right. I would consider that a part of picking a class because when you pick a class, you pick the class, your stat boost, and then your profession.
Oh, totally. It is still at the same time as picking those classes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is still three individual choices. Totally. Uh, in one essence, maybe if you want to split that up more and make 6 choices over 10 levels, you put the professions at different times. But I guess that's going into the designing portion that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, no, like absolutely. Yeah, no, just honestly, so the big thing I'm going to constantly talk about is meaningful decisions when you are doing things with your character. Like, I don't mind buying an ability or an ability package. Obviously, because I like classless games and there's kind of a whole design space that I haven't touched on yet. But I am not buying a level of fighter. I am choosing to be a fighter for levels 3, 6, and 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would
Fair
be the
enough.
main stumbling block. And once again, skipping ahead to discuss Lancer, which is based on Shadow of the Demon Lord. Lancer does something where it at no point locks you into your level choices. It really is just an optional package where it's, yeah, sometimes you are sinking to invest. And sometimes you're picking a rank of something because you want just the level 1 equipment.
Mm, mm.
Lancer requires 1 level for some equipment, 2 levels for the actual mech you're piloting. Lancer's a mech game, for those who don't know. And then a 3rd level, typically for the AI of that mech, or just some more specialized equipment. So when you, like, the main thing is, you're right, Shadow of the Demon Lord, it makes you make 3 choices. Lancer makes you make a choice every time. You could technically take only 1 level in 12 mechs across a Lancer game and just pilot the starter mech. And the
Yeah.
fucked up thing is that's a valid build. I've seen it work.
I see.
So, when it comes to, like, that's, like, Lancer is kind of a gear package where it does fall into the, rather than, like, a class-based game, there's just ranks of the gear package you're buying. Or the
Yeah.
ability package you're buying, so it almost does fall into more of a classless game.
Mm.
It straddles the line quite interestingly. So but the thing is that it lets if you describe a class as a ability package that you're not locked into, Lancer's a class game. If you describe a class as a prescriptive list of things you get at set levels that you buy into and are locked into, Lancer is not a class-based game. Join us for more interesting Lancer discussion. I am joking. But anyways, sorry, I felt I needed to state that.
Fair enough.
But
Everyone can look forward to Lancer next week.
yeah, hopefully.
Um,
The gods being kind to my internet connection.
yeah, fair enough. My last major thing I want to mention before we properly get into the design thing was I could maybe because I'm not played enough. This is everything I say is from my experiences and all that, but I can almost neatly put my whichever way I decide my preferences are for classes and classless kind of neatly with power and grit or low power. Because
Okay.
if I wanna play a more high power game or power focused game, I will probably want a class game where I want to see the synergy in play and hopefully see the perfect instance occur. Or I can't wait to see the thing I'm really good at, come up and I can, show that off type of thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
But with the classless, I don't care what they can do. I want to know what stuff I have on me and laugh at when they die. And I don't have the energy to pick from a list when they die a lot. And that's just more in reference to my, because I didn't bring this up. My favorite form of classless is fuck it. There is nothing you can choose besides the items. Ergo, knave, mouse ritter, into the odd that type of stuff. That is probably my favorite classless game so far.
Yeah.
Fuck that. It's just items.
And I will say a non-class based game where you have to make a lot of character choices, and your character can die really suddenly and really quickly. I will admit, I would get super annoyed and would say, "Can we just have class archetypes so that I can pick and go?"
Yeah.
Although I will also say I do happen to know that there are some games out there, like Call of Cthulhu, which I haven't read into too deeply, where it's very known to have easy-to-die characters, but character creation, despite being classless and kind of involving you picking a number of things, does get done pretty quickly, despite it being a skill-based game where choosing your skills and what you put your stuff into is kind of important. So, clearly,
totally.
from the popularity of Call of Cthulhu, there is a balance to be struck there. Not that either of us have ever read through it.
Yeah. I was just making mention of just basically just saying I like Master and Knave.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Designing and all that shit.
Yeah, I've been here for a few minutes. Sun is finally joining us. After that shot of the Demon Lord comment. Okay, so... Oh man, there's a lot of directions to go in. We did just talk a lot about classes. Do you want to talk about classless games?
Yeah, sure, classless. So what are the things that come to mind immediately in the design space of classless? To me, it's feat trees, prerequisites, feat pyramids, stuff like that. Themings for feats, like categories.
So, surprisingly, I can say with pretty strong confidence that I actually have more experience with a broader variety of classless games than you, which feels weird to be able to say.
I would assume so. Probably, at least play-wise.
And probably
Maybe.
read-wise at this point.
Yeah, maybe.
So, those are things. They do exist. They do not always exist. Obviously, you mentioned the design space of you don't have a class, you have your starting equipment and your stats, and that's it. Go out there and, play the game.
Yeah.
And, obviously I've mentioned how much I like Crowns and how Crowns does let you buy feats. And I think it might technically have some feats with prerequisites and feat pyramids.
Maybe.
I'd have to neither of us has that up for reference. I will say I do know that there are classless games where it is heavily skill-based. That is a realm of the classless game where it doesn't necessarily have feats, but sometimes it does, and it's just instead you have a long list of skills. What are you investing in? That is, I will admit, my preferred style of classless game to this point. And there is, of course, the middle ground, Chronicles of Darkness, a horrible fucking mess that some fool once told me they thought was the pinnacle of game design because it manages to have, and I shit you not, social play aspects. Anyways, sorry, to actually talk about Chronicles of Darkness. Chronicles of Darkness is a skills-based dice pool system that happens to have feats that you can take, some of which, depending on what part of the Chronicles of Darkness system, what game of the Chronicles of Darkness system you're playing, will objectively require you to have prerequisites, or sometimes your character type will require you to have them. For instance, vampires have to have something called disciplines, which are these special abilities they get for being a vampire. It's a whole thing, but basically you get some powers. They're different from game to game, and they do different things from different things to different things.
But skill tree, not skill tree, just skill list.
It is, yeah. Well, but it also has like feats called merits, and those do have sometimes prerequisites in your stats and skills, and they do have like pyramids and investment trees and shit. So it is the middle ground of both skills and feat, pyramids, and prerequisites.
I wanted to make mention of the skill lists because Yeah, that's one of the other main ways that you see classless games being presented. For me, one of the saddest things about skill lists is one, when there's too fucking many of them.
Mm.
But the second one is when they're not thematically interesting or, really present the game enough. Like there might be too many general or basic skills in there that well, when I see going through my skill list and I see blood sucking as one of them, I'll be like, oh, okay. I'm probably playing some kind of vampire based game. But when I see blood sucking and computer skills and car race car drifting, it's like, oh, what game am I playing?
Okay, like I know that you're saying this is a joke, but that is genuinely a thing in Chronicles of Darkness. I mean, bloodsucking is not necessarily a skill, but there are computers and driving special things, and you can be a bloodsucker. So, like, actually, though.
Oh well, yes, and I've heard the stories of car deaths and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I just want to get a point that across where I'm very tired when I see long lists and they're just very standard or basic, and peppered throughout is the things that really matter about this particular type of game.
Mm.
Because I've come to definitely prefer games that have strong themes and not genreless games.
Yeah, so you don't
So
want the GURPS experience.
yeah, I don't want the GURPS experience. Uh, you know, while I still really have a soft spot in my heart for Open Legends and all that, you know, I do like a very thematically focused game,
No,
even
and
if it's
yeah.
classless or class focused. Yeah.
I will say Open Legends is easily like one of the best, like, holy shit, what the fuck are you on examples ever, because to quote Open Legends, just through the sheer process of building a level 1 character, there's a good chance you'll have access to, like, most of the banes, boons, and feats in the game, and it is up to you to limit yourself, and you look at that and you're like, what the fuck?
Yes, that game really emphasizes narrative and flavor to make sure you don't get overwhelmed by the choices.
Yeah, and
But yeah,
it really puts it on the players. So yeah, no, 100%. Like, you know what? Using Open Legends as an example, I'm like, oh yeah, you all right, 100%. I also know you happen to like Eclipse Phase less than me, having played. To be fair, I haven't played Eclipse Phase. I've just run it. But was Eclipse Phase on that where it's just like too many skills?
yeah, probably.
Hmm.
It was getting to the point where my eyes might have was probably starting to gloss over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are like a bunch of like absolutely like fucking wild number of choices for exotic and quote unquote no skills. And I will say it's like, why do you need to, like, obviously it's funny to have a character who has no skill Martian beer brewing, but also like what does it fucking matter? But I will say Eclipse Phase does have 3 genres of spies, uh apocalypse, and exploration are the 3 like genres of that. So it does kind of get all over the place.
But back onto designing classless, what is your ideal classless, or what would you want to design for a classless game?
Oh,
How would that look?
what an excellent question. Why, it would happen to be a skills-based game. Wouldn't you know it? And wouldn't you know it, I've been on and off trying to design 1 or 5 for how long have I been doing game design? 3 years now? 3 years now.
Yeah.
What do you know? Okay, so to there's a lot of
If
design space in classless that doesn't necessarily exist in classes because a class is a fundamentally restrictive measure. You can choose whether or not to engage with those when doing classless design. For instance, it is entirely possible to build a game that is classless to have gear restrictions. Proficiency does not need to be a class-specific concept. You can have people be required to buy proficiency in weapons as a classless thing, because XP buy is one of the more common classless design features where, rather than having a set concept of levels, quote unquote, what you have is characters earn XP, and at certain XP and when they have XP, they can choose to purchase an upgrade to like their health or a skill or a feat or some kind of narrative feature or like a cool gun.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I have designed in that
yeah,
space. It's called Ballast
yeah.
Gear.
It's one of the things that I see the most. It is one of the most boring parts of the classless things, where it's like, oh, what's this? Just become trained, gain this, whatever. You just have that thing now, where it's like, okay, that's you know,
Yeah.
I've unlocked that gate now. It's one of the most boring parts of the classless thing, in my opinion. But yes,
It
it
does
is
provide.
also necessary for more traditionally, uh, at least feeling games. Yeah.
It's necessary to stop the open legends problem.
Yes.
It is the
Yes.
opposite end solution.
Yeah.
That said, I think we've both seen a version of this that was done really well. Simbaroom, which we both
Yep.
really
Yep.
liked. What Simbaroom does is it doesn't. I don't think it limits you in what type of weapons you can equip, although it might. It's been a few months since
It
we
has been a bit.
read that. But what Simbaroom does is that it allows you to buy techniques that don't necessarily go with what your hypothetical archetype might have been. So when you go out of the archetype build and build a custom character, you can build a character who is a sword like user has like a lot of like curse type magics that they use to curse their sword to inflict curses on their enemies, and like that's a valid build if you are willing to spend the design space towards it and if you survive. And that's a cool
Mm, mm.
idea. Like the best version of the concept of XP buy is not you unlock gates, but that there is a certain baseline everyone goes and you are buying specializations to do weird shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. No. From memory, I really enjoyed that. But yes, it has been a bit.
Yeah. Um
Um.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think
uh,
cuz you asked me what I would make. So,
yeah.
I guess I have to talk about why I like skill-based games.
Yes. Well, you know, the like a whole discussion of that, probably another podcast, but definitely go into it. Go ahead.
So, I would have to say that once again, it comes back to that point I've been fucking not shutting up about, which is, oh hey, a meaningful player input. But no, you're right. There are things where skill design does not become meaningful player input. What does it matter if you have 60 points in Intimidate if your character is a sniper who makes a point of never talking to people? There are
Mm,
definitely, but there are definitely things where you can wind up with theoretically useless skills in a variety of ways, where you either invested in something and it turned out to not be worth it, or you were picking like starter character packages based on like, oh, what's your background, what's your career, what are your like special interests, and then you get some skills based on that, and some of your skills are just duds.
mm,
But there are moments where skills can become really, really useful and really, really exciting, and those happen to be with a when the team is doing something that requires everyone to have separate skills to come together to accomplish something none of them could. Having people have taken skills and specialized to all come together to achieve their goal does make for an exciting story. And that might seem like a really obvious thing, but with how many games are like, well, this character's the skill monkey, and then these guys are the combat specialist, the face, the psychic, and then we have the skill monkey, the guy who goes around picking locks, disabling traps, climbing ropes, and hacking computers.
mm.
It A skill based game where you don't have a skill monkey, and everyone has the things they're good with, winds up having the potential to really feel like you're on a team of people who need to work together. And for cooperative games, that's great.
Mm.
And then also there
Well,
is something to be said with like, oh, when you have a skill at a certain level, besides the obvious benefits of leveling up a skill, you might be able to invest in a special power. But that's getting back into like that kind of. I would say I kind of, as much as I was joking about Chronicles of Darkness being a mess, I think that Chronicles of Darkness is onto something. I just don't know if I would do what they did.
Well, I just wanted to bring up. Well, I don't want to just assume that you mean class games can't have that intrinsic teamwork because,
No, they can.
yeah,
They can,
yeah,
but it's a matter of the choices made to build that teamwork are
yeah,
typically a lot less directly meaningful because it's not like, oh man, you know, like you've been learning heavy weapons for so long, like you've been investing in heavy weapons, and then like that fucking spaceship came out of nowhere and you grabbed that plasma cannon and knocked it out of the sky, and holy shit, that was so dope. Instead, I'm a heavy weapons fighter. So when the plasma thing, or so when the spaceship came out of the sky, you know, I had for, you know, I'm a level 5 heavy weapons fighter. So I heavy weapons did because that's what I do. That's what I've
fair
taken
enough.
time to invest in. That's what I do. That's what I've done, and that's what I will do tomorrow.
Fair enough. Yeah, like how I see it is like, yes, there's two ways about whatever. You know, everyone has their roles of how they can help out in a particular, like, oh, we're in a fight, fighter, please help, type of thing. Oh, we're traps, rogue, please help, type of thing. But also, I do like when those roles also have their own way. If we're emphasizing thematics with these classes, their own way of solving the same problem. You know, there is a door. I pick it, I use magic to open it, I kick it down. Uh, Based on however, if there is a face, maybe I can just sing to it or talk the door open. A very simplistic way of looking at it. But I also like when classes can do that if they're emphasizing a particular type of theme.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say, if you're willing, like, classes can become very, like you said, laser focused. And I will say, the laser focused synergy stuff is one of the cool things about classes, is seeing something be, like, very good at something. And there's a whole design space there I'd like to talk about in a bit, because obviously I want to let you finish. But you know, I
But yeah,
guess
go on.
I guess it's just either being forced to laser focused, or forced to generalize, or forced to do a thing rather than choosing it gets on my nerves.
I see. Well, uh, you make that choice by choosing that class, but fair
Yeah,
enough.
exactly. But like that's the thing, is it's not a choice as the character grows. It's a choice before I have a feel for the character and the story that's going to happen. It's a fucking shot in the dark.
I see. But in the same essence, with dead skills and all that stuff,
No, yeah, no, like
retraining, switching out, etc.
both of, I mean, neither of these systems is optimal. Both of them have flaws, and I'm willing to admit
Yeah,
to that. But I will say, if I were to have to make a choice, I would rather the fuck ups be based on my choices, and therefore allowing me to develop how I want to look at things. And I will admit, I'm just the kind of asshole who will, if it's not Chronicles of Darkness, where I hate the font and refuse and hate reading the book, I will sit down and bury myself in a list of feats and abilities and skills and build myself a character. That is, I will admit, what I like about RPGs. I like to sit down and make a build. I do not want to be a fighter who uses longsword. I want to be a guy who has a bunch of weird longsword techniques and fights with longswords. That doesn't make me a fighter. It just means that when it comes to fighting, I favor longswords.
fair enough. I do like that play style where you're playing the game before you actually at the table type of thing. I don't know if I have grown out of that play style or not, or grown weary of it, but I think those things less and less nowadays. and am
yeah.
okay with the laser focus. So, yeah, I totally agree and understand. I do like that way of playing the game before you're playing it.
And you know
Character
what?
creation is
Yeah.
its own game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you don't like that, then obviously, like, again, I'm not arguing for the abolishment of either style of game,
Oh no.
but like if I were to state, I don't even think this was supposed to be classes versus. I think it was just supposed to be classes and
No, no.
classless and the different
Yeah,
design
yeah.
space. So I mean, I should probably be a little bit less hostile. Like, I don't hate class-based games. It's just that if I'm going to sit down for a long-term campaign, I would rather sit there and actually develop my character. I
Fair
would
enough.
like to be the one to make the choices. And Shadow is the
And
best version of that because Shadow campaigns are typically fairly short and you're making choices at fixed intervals. And I play mages, which means I make choices at every interval.
I think that's why I typically don't play mages at this point. I just can't be asked with the okay, here's your own subsystem. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Have fun.
No, that's true.
Yeah. But no, yes. I can definitely understand that point of view.
So
Um,
there is a class-based design space that we haven't touched on that I think is very, very important to touch on if we're going to bring up this discussion at all.
okay.
The playbook.
Yes, very lightly touched it back when I mentioned light with beats, but yes, playbooks. Playbooks, in the simplest term, they're just classes for Powered by the Apocalypse.
And Forged in the Dark.
And Forge in the Dark, and anything of that family tree. Playbooks generally are. Oh, what's the best way to describe them?
I have a good way if you would like.
Yeah, feel free.
Playbooks are very much archetypes in a play, as in like the thing that you watch, live theater.
Commedia dell'arte.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna. Oh, I wasn't sure whether or not I should touch on the Commedia dell'arte, but if you're gonna bring it up, so the Commedia dell'arte is a specific type of Italian theater that made use of very specific archetypes or roles within the play that would be recognizable to tell people what a purpose a character serves. For instance, you would see the Harlequin, who is a character who is a fool and sometimes also serving two masters.
The angry old man, etc., etc.
Yeah, they are your TV tropes, but for Italian plays of an era.
Yeah, so you can you can look at playbooks as like I am the muscle, I am the suave person, I am, and usually, not always, but usually these playbooks, say you are the muscle man, you are the.
No, the uniqueness of a character archetype empowered by the apocalypse. Although I'm not quite as sure how it works with Forged in the Dark. We haven't read we haven't read a Forged in the Dark book for the podcast that's long enough to include playbooks. But
Yes.
you basically are the essence of something within the role of a story. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to obey any stereotypes, but your mechanical function within the story is a certain thing. That doesn't mean that you aren't a character who's interesting. The most immediate reference I can draw on, because I read it recently, is the Gunlugger in Apocalypse World Engine 2nd Edition. Just because you're someone in big heavy armor with a big gun who is not to be fucked with doesn't mean that you don't have a private life with a daughter who you care for and old photographs from the world before the apocalypse and all these things that matter to you and, something to fight to protect. It just means that when you're fighting to protect it, you're doing it with the big fuck-off guns.
And like one of the things that stands out to me about playbooks and all of that ilk is generally the uniqueness in the advancement mechanic, where like each of the classes have unique ways of advancing. Like, as a fighter-like character is topple a very important named foe, and usually the phrasing is like named or titled foe. overcome your greatest fears, show off a feat of great strength, stuff like that. Where, yeah, depending on the game and all that, yeah, no, that's what you would think the fighter would do in this movie,
Yeah.
in this story. Yeah.
And I will say something that I can't fully say is like, oh, this is across all of the Powered by the Apocalypse games, but at the very least, what happened with Apocalypse World Engine, one of the things that's interesting about playbooks is that because it's a very narrative game, and like I said, your playbook determines your role in the narrative, there also means that there can be a very large difference of scale. The Gunlugger cares about personal conflict because they are an individual character who can potentially have a gang but doesn't have to. The Chopper is a character who runs a gang, and a lot of their focus is on that, meaning that they have to worry about keeping their fucking gang in check and using their gang and dealing with their gang problems and other gangs. The Hardhold has to manage a city and worry about resources, security, order, maintaining their power, keeping their people loyal and happy. There are overlaps with all three. The Gunlugger can worry about a gang, but the Chopper is the gang focus. The Chopper does have to worry about managing people. The Hardhold manages a fucking city. And all of these people have to interact with potentially groups of underlings, but there is such a different level of focus and scale to these different characters, these different narratives that you're dealing with, that it makes them feel unique despite overlap.
Yeah, like to me, playbooks are one of the best examples of how classes can do strong theming.
Fully agreed. Playbooks are honestly one of my favorite styles of classes. But I've also seen Powered by the Apocalypse games that say, hey, no, you don't have to have a playbook. So,
Yeah. Playbooks, Powered by the Apocalypse does not mean you use playbooks. It's just one of the common
through
ways
lines
that it's done.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to double back over to Demon Lord, because one of the things that back when we were properly just playing Demon Lord, I was running games with you in it, and you were running games, home group and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I was thinking about was, I do like Demon Lord's way of doing classes because it's a bit of both. You get to pick multiple classes in a single character, and it feeds into that character customization that feat trees and all that that people like doing and all that stuff, but to a lesser degree. And I kept thinking about, what if Shadow had 12 levels? Sneak in a third tier of that. Or what if the level, the benefits you get from picking a single class, like novice, you get like, I think it's like 4 different levels that you get benefits from your novice class.
You do in fact get 4 benefits of levels from novice class. Son, would you like me to tell you a secret?
Yes.
There is already a 4th tier.
Yes, that is true, but the Paragon path...
Oh no, that is not what I'm talking about, because Paragon paths are not classes, in the sense that we've been talking about. Paragons are, frankly, the classless level-up style.
Yes, Paragons are classless level-up style, yes.
No, I'm talking about your ancestry.
That is true. We definitely can bring that up too. Ancestries, basically, you get a little level-up feature at level 4. Once you pick your ancestry, you can choose, do you want this extra benefit that your ancestry will give? Or you can be like, no, I'll just take a spell or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, ancestries are technically a very, very tiny little upgrade thing. So yeah, it is its own class. And for people of the D&D ilk who might be going into Pathfinder Second Edition, you'll get that same experience where it's like, oh, ancestries are basically their own class type of situation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you pick from basically some ancestry feats and can pick from there are ancestry feats that are scale have different levels. So you have like 4 level 1 ancestry feats where it's like, yeah, I got claws, yeah, I got big ears, yeah, I got some wings, and then at level 7, yeah, uh, if I took those wings, now I can like fly fucking super far and all that stuff, or I've developed this thing, or I've picked this out. So yeah, Pathfinder Second Edition, they have ancestry classes as well, basically. Okay. Beyond that tangent, sure. There are 5 classes in Shadow of the Demon Lord. But I was just thinking, I wrote this down just now. But I was thinking along the lines of being inspired by Demon Lord or Warhammer, where you've got the jobs, archetypes, classes, passes, or whatever. Basically, each of these paths, they each have 3 or 4 tiers within them. And the last 3rd or 4th tier, depending, is basically the pinnacle of it. But only the first 2 tiers are the second tier is basically your standard finish. So let's say, I don't know, it's like the warden or whatever. It's all about, security and defense and all that stuff. You start out as just like, a meager guard, but then you can get to the second level where you're like, you've ranked up and you're a fancy guard. Who cares about the titles now? And for the sake of things, at second tier of this guard, yeah, no, the idea of what I had for guard, I'm pretty happy with it. But if I wanted to, with more effort, I can go into the higher tiers, which I'm going to call the pinnacle of that thing. Basically, each level you can just choose, am I going to go into a new tier for a new class or keep going into the same class tier type of thing? And to keep it to allow that idea of, oh, I'm reacting to the story. I got beat up in a fist fight down the alleyway. I'm going to show them what for and go into the the fisticuffs job, and I might go further into that type of thing. But
So you were discussing the more like easy switch job style class concept?
kind of, but you still have what you take with you what you had before.
No, yeah,
So-
that's. I'm not gonna lie, I was designing a game like that at one point, but it was a lot of work, and so I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna sit here and spend fucking, months creating different tiers of, like, abilities with some dice system to support this? No.
No, totally fair enough.
Maybe one day.
To keep it more reasonable, I was thinking of how Pathfinder Second Edition does, in essence, multi-classing, but it's more than that. The archetype feats, where instead of choosing a class feat anytime you can choose to take an archetype feat, where it can be multi-classing, or it can be just a particular theme that's not big enough to be a class, like an acrobat or whatever. But to get into those that archetype feat chain, you have to take a dedication in it, where you get like basically the simple basics of that archetype. But you can't now take another dedication immediately after when you can. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to dip here, I'm going to dip there. You can't do the meme multi-class into every class thing, D&D 5e thing that you've probably seen. You need to at least take 2 feats in that archetype before you can take another archetype. So it's I'm a little bit of an acrobat, but now I'm happy. I'm gonna focus my energy thinking, learning this new field.
Okay.
You can't jump between jobs until you've taken the second tier. Or at least, let's say you're a cook and then you take the second tier in cook, then you choose acrobat, you take one tier in that, and you want to take another tier of something else entirely, like torture or whatever. But you're like, crap, I can't do that yet. I'm going to go back to cook, go up to tier 3 of cook. And, I still have acrobat tier 1, but because I've, at least ignored, hopping around, I can now take my first tier in torturer. But basically, just to slow down the idea of spreading yourself thin. That was just potential ways to do it. The simple way for me would just be like, you can't jump around. You have to at least finish the standard class by taking the second tier. And then you've got maybe 12 levels. So that allows you basically to have 6, 4, or 3 jobs in different varying levels of ranked up. That was my very...
God, you're going to have such a trip reading Lancer, because that's basically what that's done with mechs. I mean, it's a proven concept. You're not wrong, and 100%. I've seen a game that does that explicitly, and it works very well in the game's favor. In fact, I would even call it a high point. Lancer's a little bit more freeform. You don't have to commit, but most people do. Everest only is a meme build.
I see. But as Shadow of the Demon Lord, Master Pass, you get 2 things. You just get thing at this level, you get that thing at that level.
Yeah.
And that's what the Master Path is. It'd be the same thing here, but for the jobs. You get this thing at first tier and then second tier, and then you can be like, oh, okay, I'm a guard now. But there are 2 extra tiers if I want to go into it and really become the guard.
Well, no, but genuinely, that is how Lancer does it, because it's, you take 1 level and you have some abilities, you take 2 levels and you are the mech, 3 levels and you have all of the equipment that mech can have, which means you can be the epitome of that mech.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to reading Lancer even more now. But yeah, that was my example of, let's do Demon Lord, but try and make it where you definitely pick a choice at every level, and it leans into you picking a choice based on the story. Yeah. If you really want to do that, or be a design monkey and just build out your class. But
I will say that's better than my version, which was I was trying to replicate a Dragon's Dogma job class style, but I was trying to go really hard with it, where it was it would start out as really simple things like, oh, you're the town drunk, or oh, you are an accountant, and then it would go into shit like you are a fucking a king leading a kingdom, because you took so many ranks in accountant that you're able to you're able to manage a kingdom's finances, you're able to do administration work. Oh, you're a knight, oh, you dipped into mage, oh, now you're a knight cursed by the dark abyss, out to live your life, and that's just your character now. As I said, it was it was going to be one of those things where it was this might be too much work for anything other than a joke side project, but conceptually, I do agree with you. That is a fun and interesting design space to be in.
Actually, a simple way to at least Shadow of the Demon Lord has novice, expert, and master, and you could, if you wanted to be just, I want to play a fighter, like a D&D, be a warrior, fighter, and then one of the different fighter experts, like shield, or I know, master swordsman or whatever.
Yeah, there
you
are
could
a lot
condense
of
that down into my 4 tiers thing, basically, and this is the the fighter job or whatever. And
you
crunch down the novice and a little bit of the expert into tier 1 and 2 to kind of get the idea I'm going for. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I had written down just before we started.
Out of curiosity, is there anything further you want to say on classless design space? Because I kind of dipped into both class and classless design space, because clearly I'm very opinionated on this subject. as I'm sure the audience has been able to tell. But if is there anything that you want to say about classless design and making classless games that you haven't yet?
Yeah, okay. Just jumping off my previous inspiration for classing, this is more classless, where this is very rush. I just written down, or maybe basically you just have a class archetype pyramid where there are primary, secondary, and tertiary. Maybe the fourth level of feats, and either the pyramid is upside down or topside, so you pick from a wide or shallow pool at the start to be like, I want to pick a feat from the fighter pool, and I get a bigger selection or I get a smaller selection. And if I decide I want to keep picking fighter feats, I can then go down the tiers, and either the selections are more focused but stronger and emphasize that play style, or they widen out and give you more flexibility in that play style.
Okay, so when you were saying that when you envision classless gameplay, you envision it with the pyramids. That's because that is what you would design.
That's the current mind space that I would probably go to allow for very simple pools, where it's like, here's the fighter shit, here's some magic shit, here's the rogue shit, here's the cleric shit. If you want to keep it very simple, and then it's just pyramids, either focused and out, or a wide and then focused type of thing. That's probably the design space that I would go for right now.
Okay, well,
But
I do want to say this is not me like trying to be like, oh, so that's what you were thinking, but like actually just like genuinely like, so is that what you would prefer to design? Is that what you would prefer rather than what your headspace is?
If I had to do a classless thing, it would be the master at a knave thing, where it's like, fuck that. Here's your items. Here's the fun bit that you do at the start of when you make your character, rolling whatever, get your core stats, and here's just some different items that might help emphasize a particular thing. That's what I would actually design for, because I
Okay.
actually, love designing ideas around how do I make a game out of this very simple system where they say fuck any of that. But if I wanted to go further into it and go more, maybe something closer to what people assume in the traditional D&D sphere, it would definitely be the
This is
pyramids.
beyond the dragon. You don't have to worry about the traditional D&D sphere. Design what you want.
Well, fair enough. If I wanted more design levers, I would go with the pyramids.
Fair enough.
But if I wanted to work with a very tight restriction, I'd go mouse ritter knave and just work with that and say fuck any of that.
Having done a lot of mouse or of the knave design space, not so much the mouse ritter design space as of recording, successfully, I will say there is something appealing about that design space. It's very easy to get into and do things for. That said, I have consistently wanted to try my hand at the more convoluted stuff. It's just, it takes a lot of time and effort and brain power, and therefore I have a limited amount of all of those things. So it does not always necessarily go as planned.
Yeah, totally fair enough. And yeah, if I had to design for one of them, beyond going the easy answer of me just being like, I love mouse ritter, I'll just go for that. I would, like, every single time, if I had to choose one or the other, and I can't just be like, oh yeah, I'll just do mouse ritter and just say fuck it to all of them, I would choose class design, just so I can have that opportunity to make these cool concepts and build upon each other, and
So
these cool combos.
what I'm hearing
But,
is that one of
yeah.
these days I need to get you in a classless game design jam where you can't rely on mouse ritter or knave and see what you come up with.
Yeah, you have to force me not to design for knave or mouse ritter. basically.
And I'm not even saying this as a like just to keep you away from it, just to see. I'm curious to see what you would do with that restriction then.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thoughts for the future.
Thoughts for the future.
If you happen to know a classless design game that is open license and is not basic role playing, because I don't want to deal with their license, go ahead and comment on Beyond the Dragon, and I will force Sun to read it, and then one of these days we'll do it for one of our design episodes.
Oh, I see. Beyond that, classless. No, yeah. I appreciate its freedom, and I really liked it in Open Legend and all that stuff. I always appreciate when the classless games do provide archetypes and all that, because it's feeding both crowds. It's like, hey, we understand that some class-based characters, players are coming over and they need some guidance. So it allows that space for them. So that is one thing that classless definitely has over classes, because it's a bit harder to do that the other way around.
Yeah, if your classes are confusing people, oof, you're fucked, buddy.
Well, no, classes, the class games providing enough happiness to the classless based crowd, basically.
Oh yeah, that is also a lot harder to do.
And like, the best way is like how, Pathfinder does it, where, the skeleton of the class is all chosen for you. Now you emphasize different parts and all that with the feats, or make choices happen more like Demon Lord.
No, that's fair. And I would still sit there and argue with that class design space where I'm like, yeah, but then why can't I just buy proficiency in only halberds and then pick halberd feats? But I am, as well noted by this entire conversation, the kind of person who literally reacts negatively to any kind of book telling me what to do unless it's powered by the apocalypse. That's the class game. I like playbooks. I want to play a gunlugger. I want to play a gunlugger so bad. Never get to. Yeah. No one ever fucking runs Apocalypse World.
But yeah, I like being inspired by the concepts laid out to me and be like, okay, this is cool. And I'll probably, I will either lean into those concepts, or maybe if I'm have the energy or I've played it enough, I'll okay, how do I massage these and work with what design space they've given me, and what basically everyone does in D&D, and reflavor their classes, or work with the very clunky and boring multi-class system. But yeah, beyond that, I don't have much else to say about classes and classless. I like both. They're really nice. If I had to pull it down altogether, I prefer the restraints of the class-based system. I like the theming of it. I think it helps really emphasize the playstyles really quickly for the games. And for classless, just give me mouse reader. They're my thoughts.
That's fair. So yeah, you like classes as a way to up the power scale, and you like classless games as a way to reduce the power scale.
Yeah. Yep. Going back to the point I made earlier. Yep.
Alrighty. As for me, I don't think I have many more design tips. The classless space is a space that can be very difficult to get right, but when it comes together, it can sing beautifully for player choice. While it's true you can use a classless design style to reduce the power scale by just giving players a list of equipment and no special abilities, you could also obviously dip into the special abilities in a variety of ways that all have their pros and cons, but it really is honestly a question about how much choice do you want to give players to interact with their game, and how many spoons do you have in your design space to sit there and define a class, because boy howdy, or not design, or define a classless thing and balance that. Because I've tried to do both, and both are fucking hard. They have their own unique
Yeah.
challenges. Game design is not super easy. Fucking shocker.
Yeah, classes and classless. Do your players want to design? Are they designers? Are they discoverers? Are they exploration and design? They both have their cons and the like.
But yeah, no. So ultimately, I guess if I had to give like some kind of conclusion for a sense of finality, classes bore me, but I understand their function and purpose, and they are probably an easier way for people to get into the game space that for tabletop RPGs than if you were to just dump a long list of abilities and say, figure it out, fucker, because we all have heard stories about someone who tried to get into a game by playing Vampire the Masquerade for the first time, or like Shadowrun, and they were like, yeah, and it was completely nonsensical, and I had no idea what I was doing. And you know what? That's fair. If you're that person and you didn't like what happened, please do not let that flavor your experience of classless games. There are good ones out there, I promise you. Try Simbaroom, maybe.
Try Mouse Ritter.
Oh, yeah, you know what? Try Mouse Ritter. You will not necessarily be confused by Mouse Ritter. But no, yeah, so general thoughts. Classless design allows for a lot more wacky shit that no one could have possibly planned for, and a lot more player control, and if from a mechanical perspective, if you care about player control over what they are able to do, Classless is very clearly just better at doing that, but ultimately...
Yep.
There is just the fundamental question of game scope as to whether or not delving into a classless game design concept is even strictly necessary. There are plenty of games where if you were to sit there and say, well, I took it and I made it classless, I would look at you and say, fucking why? It doesn't need that much, like, detail.
Yes. With either one, you can get away. You can go overboard, and you should design your game knowing why you chose classes or classless.
Yeah. If someone designs Knave and adds in classes and is like, I took Knave and I didn't change anything and I added in well, I guess I technically did that, but only because Sun's technical definition of classes involves a starting character kit.
Yep. I'm totally fine with classes just being starting kits.
That said,
package.
So you're fine with classless as long as you get a class at the very beginning.
Well,
if everything after that was XP buy.
To me, like I'm because of packages and all that stuff. Generally, I now don't need to worry about any of that stuff, like including like buying extra skills or any of that shit.
No, but like let's say there was but it's you know what, I'm gonna fucking, I realize we're wrapping up, but I'm gonna hit you on this because I actually designed this. So
okay,
so a game gives you like basically a starting set of stats and equipment and spells if you have them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is all it gives you is your stats, health, and starting gear. After that, it is whatever the fuck you want, including having actual XP buy for more health, more stats, and like upgrading your equipment or learning new spells. It is basically an XP buy game, but like you just start out with a set thing. Is that still class?
And is there? Yeah, no, that's an archetype. I would call that a class in my eyes.
Okay, so you're fine with XP buy as long as first you get an archetype.
If you can hand me something and I can start playing, I'm gonna call that a class, basically.
All right, cool. Glad that we nailed that down. All right, thank you everyone. We've talked a lot about this. But yeah, no, basically the design space really begs the question of how much control over exactly what they're doing do players need or do players get, because classless can be a way to remove player control. with Knave and
Mhm.
Mouse Ritter, where you really just have very little that you get. So anyways, ultimately choose the scope that best suits your game. If you make a classless game, I'm probably going to be a lot more for it, although there are classless games I've seen where I look at them and I'm like, what the fuck? So, with that, thank you for joining us today as we discussed classes versus classless games. Join us next time for more indie tabletop discussion and design. I've been Oscar C. Tango, and joining me has been Sun Gone.
You can find me at sungone_ on Twitter, sun on starplaying.games, and sungone on itch.io and YouTube.
And you can find me at at Stranded TTRPG on Twitter, Oscar C. Tango on startplaying.games, and Stranded Publishing on itch.io. There's a YouTube channel somewhere. I wouldn't look for it if I were you. You can find all these links in the description, and remember, don't be afraid to venture beyond the dragon.